Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity of joining you this afternoon to share some insights on the technology Elder Abuse Action Australia uses on Compress.info. Before I begin my presentation, I'd like to acknowledge the Indigenous country on which I live, which is 90 minutes north of Sydney in New South Wales, Australia. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Darkinjung land, and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. I pay my respects to their elders past and present. EAAA is also committed to ensuring equitable and inclusive responses to end elder abuse for people with diverse characteristics and life experiences. I'm with you today to share the experience of Compress.info, a project of Elder Abuse Action Australia, and how we raise awareness and improve the lives of older people in Australia and the role technology plays. I would also like to provide some context of why we have a national plan to end the abuse of older people in Australia. The definition of elder abuse, and there's a couple of slides that just provide some greater context of where EAAA or Elder Abuse Action Australia works towards. World Health Organization defines the abuse and neglect of older people as a single or repeated act or failure to act, importantly, including threats that result in harm or distress to an older person. These occur where there is an expectation of trust and or where there is a power imbalance between the party responsible and the older person. There are slight variations on this definition of elder abuse depending on perhaps the country you live in, but this is the one that we refer to most regularly. And in another piece of context, one of the drivers of elder abuse is ageism, or as some are referring to it now as gerontism, the abuse of particularly older people, whereas ageism is a more general term that addresses any age. So I might be ageist towards a younger person, for example. One of our colleagues, Every Age Counts, has produced campaigns and resources to challenge our thinking and raise awareness of who and what ageism impacts. And I will share out of session a video that I think is interesting to look at, and it describes ageism in a particularly thoughtful way. But I'll share it after this presentation and ask my colleagues here on the call to share that with you. Personally, I stand for a world without ageism, where all people of all ages are valued and respected and their contributions acknowledged. I commit to speak out and take action, not only in my paid work, but also outside in my communities, to ensure older people can participate on equal terms in all aspects of life. And what the numbers say are interesting to us. One of the first commitments of the first national plan, we're about to have our second plan released in a few months, we expect, was a national elder abuse prevalence study. The Australian Institute of Family Studies undertook this work in 2020, and it was published in late 2021. It was the first time a national prevalence study had been conducted in Australia, and the findings provided both a baseline but also questions on what else was missing in the data for further research. The key findings of the study were that 15% of people over 65 had experienced one or more types of elder abuse in the 12 months prior to the study being conducted. In an Australian context, this was over 600,000 people living in the community, as opposed to aged care or residential services, so living in the community with experience of elder abuse. More than half the perpetrators, or what we now call people who cause harm, were a family member. They might be an intimate partner, adult children, and increasingly grandchildren. However, social connections are also well represented among perpetrator groups, with neighbours, friends, and acquaintances being around about 30% of those people who cause harm. And interesting in relation to that point, only 1 in 3 people sought help from a third party about their abuse. which means that people are going back to perhaps their family and their friends who may have been causing them harm because they didn't feel confident in talking to anybody else. Perhaps they were full of shame and embarrassment about talking about this kind of abuse at an older age. Psychological abuse is the most prevalent of the subtypes of abuse, and the prevalent study data suggests people experiencing one type of abuse were also likely to be experiencing other types as well. There was and is a need to educate the community on aspects of elder abuse. In Australia, the elder abuse sector suggests that we are at least 10 years behind the progress in responses that family and domestic violence sectors have undertaken in Australia. So we have a bit of catching up to do. Another little bit of context is digital literacy. I thought it would be useful to provide a reference in the digital literacy of older people in Australia. And whilst this survey is a little old now, it's an indicator of the opportunity to bust some myths of this cohort. However, the digital divide is more a question for equitable access to smart devices, access to reliable internet, and the cost of doing both of those things. In Australia, for example, there are many areas that are very, very remote where there is no access to any kind of internet access. Wi-Fi into the home is expensive, and people live miles and miles in these remote areas, miles and miles away from libraries or other places that might house free internet access. Digital literacy levels in this 2017 survey suggests that there were high levels of relevant to their age range, representing 36% of the target audience. High levels is defined as those who perform online transactions at least once a week. So that might be, mobile shopping, online shopping. It might be accessing social media and those kinds of things. More moderate users were still 30%, over 30% of the target population, and they performed online transactions less frequently than once a week. So that's more than half people who are moderate users of digital services. And so that suggests to me that there's only a small percentage really who don't do very much online activity at all, and even smaller, less than 8% of the target population who were absolutely non-internet users. And there's a fair bit to burrow in on this level of detail, but this data suggests that older people are familiar and competent with some digital services. And interestingly, anecdotally, in conversations that I've been having recently with some of our major banks who are trying to unlock this digital divide, it seems that it's perhaps more of a question of confidence engaging with systems that perhaps aren't well designed for an older person to access. And I think that's an interesting point that we may explore in questions. So to Compass, we started off in 2019, funded by the Commonwealth Attorney General's Department, to begin development of a national digital knowledge hub. This initiative was a key commitment in the Commonwealth's first national plan to end the abuse of older people, and our task was to raise awareness and provide education resources on the topic of elder abuse and connections to specialist services. The Knowledge Hub became Compress.info and was launched in late November 2019. As part of scoping this Knowledge Hub, EAAA undertook a national consultation to determine the types of topics, resources, and functionality needed in the initial rollout, what we called minimal viable product. And this included simple navigation, downloadable resources was a really important aspect to this. And I'll share some information later in this presentation to suggest how important it's been. Accessible language, translations where that was possible. And as you may know, translating material is quite costly, and our budget is limited in that regard. So we've done some workarounds which we think work quite well. And imagery that connected to diverse communities, people and communities that we needed to be able to talk to, and they needed to see their own image on Compass. We determined from this consultation, for example, that Compass should be very simple to use, no more challenging than perhaps an average online shopping service. It needed to be factual, and users didn't need high levels of literacy to access information and resources. We started off with a content strategy that really had a strong purpose and is similar to the way we work now. And it's to further the understanding, prevention, and response to elder abuse. Personas have been refined in the last 12 months, but the core of our strategy remains anchored to the same pillars of content. We now use some different tools. We've updated the content platform to meet the accessibility to the site and simple navigation. We've commissioned content from an increasing number of authors, and we run monthly social media campaigns to grow our audience, awareness and knowledge for the community and services. Many of whom use Compass as a research source. So does our Attorney General's Department and many other government departments and local governments in Australia. And just as a snapshot of the last 12 months, and I will note that when we started with Compass back in late 2019 and really even into 2020, we were struggling to reach 2,000 visitors a month, and now we're doing that almost every day. So it's quite a big change. Almost 600,000 visitors to the site in the last 12 months. They're unique visitors. They're not returning visitors, but unique. On an average, they visit 2.5 pages per visit. We have almost 50 new feature articles that we've put up over the past 12 months. And those feature articles across a very wide range of topics, and I'll take you through some detail of that in a moment or two. And I spoke earlier about the importance of having articles and information that could easily be downloaded on PDF. Over the past 12 months, we had 14,000 articles downloaded. And typically that allows people, and that might be a service provider working with an older person as a client, they might see something that is a checklist or some information, summary pages, those kinds of things that they might print off and share with their client. They might even email it to them, but it's often possible that they can print it off and share it with their clients. And we've just done a quick wrap on the on the September 2025 data, and we've had over 70,000 visitors last month. We feature 4 articles per month to run these campaigns through, and the feature articles that worked very well for us over the course of this last month were "Why is change getting harder?" and "Misconceptions about dementia and decision making." And that's a really interesting one because it sort of marries along with a little animated video we released earlier this year, which talks about what is capacity. And there's a lot of misunderstanding about what is capacity for people with dementia, for people who may have a period of illness, and what are the actions that need to take place for an individual, their carer, their next of kin, in an Australian context, perhaps enduring powers of attorney or their enduring attorney. So misconceptions about dementia and decision making is an incredibly important area, and that has helped bring many more visitors to the site. 2 key outcomes of this content were clicks to service providers, which is is good. We have almost 600 service providers listed on the site, and people can click through to their website and read a bit of summary information. But because the phone numbers are live and 85% of our visitors use mobiles to access Compress.info, it also means they can call the service from their mobile phones, which is an incredibly important asset, we think, to building engagement, building relevance, building connection to Compass and the information that we supply. This slide speaks to the kinds of channels we've used in the past 12 months. We've reached, in that time, over 500,000 people living in Australia with a very high level of engagement with Compass. Over almost 50,000 people have engaged with us by commenting, reacting to a post. And we've reached them by Facebook media campaigns for the most part. They might save a particular article, they might share it with someone, but the most people have clicked through to Compass to read an article. Over 40,000 people of that 46,500 people who engaged with us actually went through to Compass. It's very strong data that demonstrate Compass is not only reaching a lot of people and performs above industry standards for engagement and click-through rates, but it's also very inexpensive for us to use. And of course, it's true that Google AdWords have very specific criteria, as does Facebook, and we need to adjust our communications and campaign styles. But based on our spend through Facebook and Google AdWords, the cost of running the campaign based per user was approximately 2 cents for reaching over 500,000 Australians. And that happens every month. The average click through rate is 13 cents. And the media agency that supports us on this campaign planning has never worked on an account that's delivered these sort of results. So overall, all of our options around different sort of media opportunities and channels, we spend about 5 cents on all clicks on content, which is astounding. We also now have more than 500 inbound links into Compass, which helps with our SEO performance, which of course always needs more input. At IAAA, we're eager to find ways to engage with diverse audiences and have content available to meet their needs. We continue to commission new authors and bring obvious content directly about elder abuse, but also health and well-being. That sort of light and shade, like eating well in your 60s, 70s, and 80s, along with the alienation of your grandparents, are important elements that give people an opportunity to engage with us on less difficult topics. But prevention is a key part of our work, and those kinds of issues and topics give us that opportunity. Just to let you know too, we use videos, on-point interviews, which is a series we've run, and webinars, and they've been watched more than 3.5 million times. Our articles have been watched over 1 million times. We use a company called Weglot, W-E-G-L-O-T, to help with translations, and we use Userway that, for tools that help people that may need the site read to them, options for people with sight impairments and dyslexia. Again, more accessibility for our visitors to the site. This quiz, Am I Safe and Respected, has been in development for a long time, and I look forward to perhaps coming and visiting you next year to speak more about that. But it's a way for us to connect more with people. And in summary, Compass is an extremely cost-effective way to communicate with older people, their friends and families. Content is highly engaging, informative, and preventative. We use good design informed by our users, and we use technology to engage with older people to inform them on content and services to connect with. AI is one of the things that we're seeking to explore over the next 6 months or so, as it is mapping services to provide people with nuanced locational information.
Decision-making capacity refers to a person's ability to manage their own life and make their own choices. Each and every day, many of us make hundreds of decisions, from deciding what to have for breakfast and what to wear for the day, through to bigger lifestyle and financial decisions, such as buying a home or choosing between treatment options because of an illness. Decision-making capacity is important for our future planning because a medical assessment that says our capacity is impaired or lost may mean someone else steps in to make decisions for us. This person may be someone we choose as our enduring power of attorney or enduring guardian, or may be someone appointed by a tribunal or court. So, what is decision-making capacity? And who decides if you have capacity for specific types of decisions? You have capacity if you can understand the facts relating to a decision, you can remember information relevant to that decision, you can use or weigh up competing information relevant to that decision, and you can communicate the decision to others in some way. It doesn't have to be verbal. It's important to understand that losing decision-making capacity is rarely total. A person's capacity is decision-specific, which means that they might have capacity to make some decisions but not others. A person's decision-making capacity can also fluctuate, depending on a range of factors like grief, stress, and effects of medication, or an illness, such as a type of dementia, which might only slowly have an impact for some, but could quickly cause a decline for others. A capacity assessment can be informed by a medical opinion from a specialist doctor. A lawyer needs to be satisfied that a person has decision-making capacity for a specific legal task or problem. And it's the state or territory civil and administrative tribunal that acts as the umpire about whether a person does or does not have capacity for a particular decision if it is in dispute or if a decision is needed rapidly. Conversations about capacity, personal values and decision-making preferences are important for ensuring that someone has the best chance of planning for their future and putting safeguards in place for their well-being and security. For more information about capacity, enduring guardianship and enduring powers of attorney, visit Compress.info.
I'd like to thank you for your attention and this opportunity, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth, for sharing how Compress serves as an important platform in this digital world era. Not only the users can seek useful information and get help, it is also an important infrastructure for the public to take part. Beth is now with us. Hello, Beth.
Hello.
Hello. Let's take some questions from our online audience. The first question, Compress serves as an important resource hub for different stakeholders. Is there a response mechanism for help-seeking requests?
There's several. Compress is not a direct service provider in that way. We do respond to comments and requests for information. We do provide referrals to other organisations. And one of the live phone numbers on our site is the National Elder Abuse Helpline. And that automatically identifies where the caller is calling from and redirects their call to a state or territory helpline. And they have connections to services of different sorts, case management, counselling, advocacy, and a range of other different services.
I see. Okay, let's take the next question. How to protect user safety when they are browsing the Compress website?
Because we're a site that doesn't engage with things like online shopping, when we're not collecting any personal data from the visitors to the site, we have we meet the government standard for privacy and encryption and digital safety for our visitors. So we do as much as we have to and want to in that space, but the privacy of any person that comes and speaks to us, whether it's on Compass or through our own 1-800 line, is paramount, and it's featured. There's a privacy policy on the Compass site as well, but the user safety is incredibly protected.
I see. Okay, for the next question, from your experience, what are the common obstacles that prohibited older people from seeking help? And what would you advise service provider to empower them to overcome these difficulties?
Look, one of the greatest challenges in the complexity of what is the abuse and mistreatment of older people is the embarrassment and shame that the older person may feel. It also may be that they're still living with the person causing them harm, and that is also very, very difficult. Some people may not even believe or understand that they're experiencing elder abuse, and so it's difficult then to often find the person and connect them with services. So one of the aspects for us is to try and educate their adult children, because we know that more than half of the people causing harm to older people in Australia are intimate partners, their adult children, and increasingly their grandchildren, adult grandchildren. So there's a fundamental campaign that we're running to try and educate younger adults about elder abuse, and it's interesting to me. It's starting to gather traction in the general population. When I go to events, when I even go to social activities on my own behalf, when I talk about what I do for work, people suddenly start to realise that something that they know about, might be a grandparent, their own parents, or someone they know, start to recognise that elder abuse is part of that picture. And that could be coercive control, which is an incredibly powerful tool that people who cause harm use to stop an older person reporting or seeking help. So we think there needs to be, across service providers in any jurisdiction, the need to better understand where the older person is at the moment that they contact a service. We also think there's lots of opportunities to engage with people one-on-one in ways that isn't talking about elder abuse. The Am I Respected and safe tool that I mentioned in my presentation doesn't actually mention elder abuse at all. It talks about, does a person control their own money? Do they know what's in the bank? Do they know where their medications are? Are they safe in their home? Do they control what happens in their home? And I think we need to understand that the barrier of embarrassment and shame will stop some people reporting their elder abuse or engaging further. And we just have to always all of us work harder to better understand where an older person is and how difficult it is for them to come forward and ask for help. So we need to be very empathetic and understand our language needs to be simple, engaging, to connect with those people.
I can see that the reason behind people that they don't seek help can be diverse and multiple. And public education is always crucial to empower people to get more informed decision. All right, let's look
I think that's very true. And the layers and different types of elder abuse make it even more difficult for an older person or a member of their family or a close family friend to understand how they might need to act. So the more we can provide education to the general community, the more we will have an impact in reducing and then ending elder abuse.
Yeah, exactly. Let's look at the next question. Any plan to add new functions to Compass website?
We're looking at the moment at using AI and looking at the scope of where we might start, and where we're going to start is a little chat box that looks at content within Compass. And because people who are coming to our site may not understand the terms of elder abuse. They might have looked at an article like, eating well in your 60s, 70s and 80s, come to the website, and then started to explore it. They may not necessarily recognise the term of elder abuse. So that particular tool is one where it will surface content that is relevant to their circumstance and things that they are already experiencing. The AI tool will help even more explore the content that currently exists. And we've got, thousands of downloads, lots of connections to other services, lots of HTML content on the site that provides case studies and examples of how elder abuse occurs and what the responses may need to be. So AI is an incredibly important thing, and how that develops on our site is also important. And because Australia is such a large country, we have many millions of people living in remote areas where there is a lacking of services. Being able to physically map all the services that do exist, so people can punch in their postcode or go, something that to support me with financial abuse that might be, 20 kilometres near my house. Those kinds of things are really important. So that's been in development for a little while. We're expecting to see that in the first 6 months of next year. And then we're just wanting to, for the rest of the site, look at how we continually understand and better to continually understand our users' requirements and expectations and how we best deliver them that service. One of the things that's moving us away a little bit from digital, for example, is to go to our local governments physically and present information. So, there are particular days like World Elder Abuse Awareness Day on the 15th of June. Lots of organisations have physical events, and we are increasingly going to some of those and having our partners represent us at those kinds of activities and meet people where they are and show them the site, show them that they can see it on their smartphone or on an iPad or indeed on their desktop and the breadth of information available to them.
Thank you. For the next question, it's about the website statistic. You just shared in your presentation, you have gathered some statistic from the users who who browse the website. So any insights you can draw from these statistics?
So some of the data we've collected suggests that more than half, almost 60% of our users are over the age of 55, or visitors over the age of 55. Most of them are women, and that's from the content that's revealed in the Facebook campaign. Interestingly, people coming from a Google ad search are younger, and they stay on the site for longer, and they're very much a mixed gender. And so that is one of the things we're working on at the moment, is how we can change our media spend and our marketing spend to bring more men into the site. Because sadly in Australia at the moment, the second highest cohort of people committing suicide are men over the age of 85. And whilst, one of the drivers of that may not be elder abuse, it's an important element for us to consider how we might talk about that on Compass and the kinds of conversations we can then engage people on. So it's interesting to us that we've got strong engagement from people over 55. They're coming in often through Facebook or Google AdWords. Increasingly, they're coming in organically because they're searching, and our SEO performance is improving all the time. But equally, the kind of content that we're producing, like we're in the midst of talking a lot about the enduring powers of attorney, enduring guardianship, and the Australian Guardianship Council have about to re-release a publication called You Decides, Who Decides, and that is about all of those enduring documents and how you plan for the future. And in each jurisdiction we have 8 states and territories, the rules around those enduring documents are a little bit different. So this document helps that out, and we're starting Q&As next week by jurisdiction. So we have a number of experts talking about their own state or territory and trying to demystify the challenges around those documents, the importance of completing them, the importance of including a lot of information to ensure that a person's wishes are adequately and adequately expressed. If it's not written and it's not certified, people can't act on it. Other lawyers, police, first responders, they are unable, and banks, superannuation funds, all of those organisations need documentation. So we really want to encourage people to have a proper will, have their enduring documents well and truly set out, that make sure their wishes and preferences are expressed clearly and with a level of detail. We just want that circumstance much more clear for families and friends and supporters and carers of older people.
I see. Thank you for your sharing, Beth. Thank you once again, Beth, for your dialogues. That's all of the questions today. We definitely look forward to learn more from you in futures. Let's stay in touch.
Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you. Coming up next, we'll take a look at the scenario and cross-sectoral efforts in Canada. Our next speaker, Professor Laura Watts, is widely regarded as one of the foremost global authorities on aging and longevity. As the CEO of CanAge, she leads Canada's national seniors advocacy organization. As a lawyer and assistant professor at the University of Toronto, Laura conducts research on topics including dementia, age tech, financial regulation, elder abuse, and loneliness. Her new book, Let's Talk About Aging Parents, debuted as a bestseller worldwide and is now available in 9 languages across 12 countries. She frequently advises governments in Canada and internationally, and has been an invited presenter at the United Nations, the World Health Organization, the International Red Cross, and the Vatican. Laura will share with us on financial exploitation and artificial intelligence, confronting the realities. Laura, please.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining today. I don't know if you are also up worrying, wondering if the financial exploitation that we've been practicing and training for, that we've been giving presentations about, how to identify, are you worrying that actually it's out of date? In fact, it's too analog and old-fashioned. Well, we should be worried. When we're thinking about financial exploitation right now, the reality of the circumstance is that the degree of AI, artificial intelligence, sophistication is both very profound right now and increasing almost exponentially. My organization is the Older Persons Association of Canada, but we are working around the world to try to make sure that we're both raising awareness of the financial exploitation targeted by artificial intelligence, but also to understand that this is a trans-border issue. There's no such thing as national borders in this case, and we really have to make sure that when we're communicating about things like the grandparent scam, which many people will be familiar with, this is the type of information that we are often showing people, or financial institutions are letting people be aware of the concerns with. It's this older style telephone call, and it's somebody saying, "Hi, Grandma, hi, Nana." And then they mumble the name, and then they say, "I'm in trouble." And then there's some way that they're trying to extract the money. And this is very effective. This is one of the most effective scams and frauds that there has been. but this is now completely out of date. This is what it looks like now. It will actually be your grandchild in their voice, using their turns of phrase, in their own type of speech, calling you on FaceTime or any other video call. And when you can interact with that person, thinking, of course, it is your grandchild. And it is, in fact, an AI, and it is a fraud and scam, which is almost impossible to detect. When we think about the difference between how frauds and scams used to be, knocking on doors, trying to sell things to people, calling on the telephone randomly, even sending emails in a mass way, and the degree of sophistication, micro-targeting that's happening, it's the difference between paddling in a canoe and taking a rocket ship to the moon. We're used to talking about AI in lots of ways, about vehicles, we're talking about it in ways of planning, we're talking about it in terms of efficiency and health and social care. And all of that is true. These are some of the biggest topics. How can we use autonomous driving to improve traffic flow? How can we make sure that older people can use autonomous driving to get from point A to point B? How can we ensure that people without specialist care can use AI to support increased imaging, and making sure that predictive measurements and personalized responses to health and social care, as well as for financial supports, can assist? And these are all really important things. But while we're talking about things like language models and broad AIs and generative AIs, what we don't usually see is the darker side of this. Yes, many more older people globally are using technology. In my country, about 85% of people over the age of 85, it's a big number, are using technology connected to the internet almost daily. And we're working to make sure that people are reducing their anxiety and getting more connected, using it for things like making sure that they're able to take care of their own financial accounts or participate in social engagement, sometimes even online exercise classes. So at the same time as we're trying to encourage our older populations to use technology and keep up with that, and frankly, it's hard for anyone to keep up with the pace of new systems, new operating systems, changes to your home screen, how you use search functions. It's hard for anyone. But if you're a person that grew up perhaps before electricity or before automobiles became common or before people were using airplanes on a regular basis, can you imagine what it's like just when you got used to Google? Now you got to get used to ChatGPT. So there's a huge amount of learning on a constant basis that our aging populations need to do. It's a good thing. But at the same time, there is the sense that everything is watching you. And it's true. Whether it is cameras that are in the streets, whether it's the cookies that are using that for personalization, whether it's your apps that are tracking every keystroke you make and how long you spend on each web page, everything is tracking you. And so when we're thinking about the different types of frauds and scams, some of them are the same in the sense that they're the same names. It could be a romance scam. Well, it may have been that you went to a community center and someone struck up a fake romance with you and was doing it to extract your financial assets. Then it became maybe it's an online dating where they're actually moving it. So they're moving away from the in-person into an online platform. And that's been extremely effective, particularly for older people who are feeling lonely or who want to make sure that they're getting out there, as we call it, and dating and making social connections again. But the micro-targeting of interests, the types of pictures that would be most appealing to you as an individual, the way that they are phrasing things, the asks that they are making for money are now completely tailored to all of those keystrokes and all of those web pages and all of those links that you have used. Now, the irony is one of the biggest new frauds and scams, which are generated by AI, are about things like impersonating not just banks, the way that you used to get an old email, a phishing scam, as you would call it, with a PH in English, but actually, really, the new emails or the new communications are almost impossible to tell the difference between your actual financial institution or your actual government agency. It's not full of bad spelling mistakes and strange formatting. It is so perfect in many cases that actually the institutions themselves can't really tell the difference. The way that we tell people to be aware when it's a fraud and scam, maybe it's the search function isn't the real financial institution, or the number that's calling you isn't actually the number of your local organization or government agency. But now it is. So the way that we have been telling people to watch out for frauds and scams is frankly outdated. If you're also talking about one of the bigger areas is the interest in cryptocurrency. And as digital currencies and coin-based currencies are exploding in interest, and this is particularly true in many of the emerging markets, where we're seeing a wide adaptation of use of coin-based or Bitcoin-based or one of the other types of stable coins for everyday monetary exchange, particularly on a cash basis, where that country's financial currency may be in flux. Actually, the crypto approvals, crypto scans, the wallet draining that's happening from that is now in the hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, in some cases in the billions of dollars. And this is increasing as particularly older people are getting more both used to it, and as crypto or ETF, electronic trade funds, currencies becomes more validated by the markets. In fact, quite recently in the United States, not in Canada, but in the United States, they've just now made it possible for retirement funds to actually have crypto as well. And so since there's so much talk about crypto, but it's hard for anyone to really understand, many older people now are getting caught in the cryptocurrency scams, not with real cryptocurrency, as well as they may be investing in something that actually isn't what they think it is. So that becomes kind of a gray market. The irony is one of the big, more recent AI-enabled scams is actually from regulators, financial regulators, saying that your information has been exploited, that there has been a privacy breach, that your accounts are breached. And again, it looks now perfect. And it even would have the name of your contact person that you may have a relationship with. And you may actually reach out to that person, and it will be an automated face and voice, just like we had with the grandparent scam. So when we're looking at what kind of impact this has we have the data from some places, but not others. The United States, I'm Canadian, but the United States has recently done a review and found that losses to online frauds were about $5 billion in 2024. That is an almost 43% year-over-year increase. The reality of the circumstances, I've seen estimations 10 times and even 50 times that number, because the unreported cases are the ones that we don't get the numbers for. But that number of about 5 billion, I've heard as much as $300 billion in terms of online frauds and scams. So not all of that is for older persons, but many of them are. And when we say it's a borderless crime, it's so important that we're talking about it this kind of forum, because you can be anywhere in the world, both perpetrating it and being impacted by it. As we become more global citizens, as our mobile phones, our email accounts, and even our interests become more global, that degree of exposure means it's incredibly difficult to track and get back the information. So very recently in my country, in Canada, there's been a new initiative, and I can't tell you how underestimated this is. So most recent review in the Canadian data say it's about $647 million in reported dollars lost. I can tell you it's actually in the billions of dollars. And we have very little in terms of if you report what happens. The reality of the circumstances for most AI-enabled crime that's happening specifically targeted to older people, there is very little in terms of individual recompense. It's very hard to prosecute. It's very hard to get services and supports to. And so you need to make sure that we are actually both modernizing our communications about the good old-fashioned frauds and scams to really talk about the AI-enabled frauds and scams, as well as we need to have a more systemic approach within government and institutions and regulators to get them. So if you're thinking about things like ransomware attacks, or whether or not you're going to have a data breach, or whether or not your systems, whether that be your personal systems or your financial agency systems, or even your regulator systems, the reality of the circumstance is it's not if, it's when. And so it's very important that we don't put the wrong fix in the wrong place. So putting glasses below your nose doesn't help you see better. In the same way, we need to make sure that we're actually putting the right solution to the right problem. And that means we need to confront the reality of the AI-enabled frauds and scams. In doing that, we also have to make sure that the way that we're doing the fixes, particularly for things like privacy breaches, isn't making things even more problematic for older people. Now, we're having so much 2-factor and 3-factor identification that people who used to be able to do their online banking, for instance, now just can't. They don't have a secondary type of technology. It's too complicated. It can frankly frustrate anybody. And often the user experience of 2FA and 3FA validation and trying to problem solve the puzzles are by their nature incredibly frustrating for many older people. Frankly, for just about anyone, but especially for older people. And so you may have somebody that was able to do their online banking before, but now, because many of the financial institutions are trying to protect against privacy breaches and cyber attacks, which they should, so much of it is downloading that responsibility to the individual consumer with this many factor identification, which is very awkward and sluggish, and frankly is creating so many barriers that the older person just hands over their phone to somebody else and says, I don't know, can you do this? So what's happening is we're trying to make people safe, but instead, because it's so problematic, we're actually going around all the safety protocols and actually making people less safe, because that good old-fashioned one-on-one financial exploitation is now happening in order to avoid getting the privacy breaches. What we do need to do is think about more modern ways of overcoming those security measures. We know we need them. That's not a question. Things like biometric authentication are very helpful, whether it's a retinal scan or an ear scan or a fingerprint, things that the older person would have that don't require memory of having many different passwords, trying to do emails backs and text messages packs and trying to get into programs, all to see that things are becoming increasingly difficult and complicated. So trying to make sure that we're using some easier things like increasing biometric authentication is a way forward. It's important that you do need to have a hotline, but understanding that there's a massive amount of shame, and many people won't even know actually that they have been scammed. I mean, if you bought fake cryptocurrency, you may think that you own cryptocurrency. And so these are some of the examples of the many different kinds of AI-enabled frauds and scams that we should be really worried about right now. And these are a top list of them. You know, other organizations have done some good things. Australia has put together a national anti-scam center. And what you see in this particular slide is that it's a very, very multifaceted approach to it. So they're not just looking at computers or financial institutions in isolation, but they're working with their telecom regulators. They're putting together different outreach activities. They're working with cryptocurrency partners to try to fix it at the upflow level, the systems level. So as we're starting to think about designing the new frameworks and these, quote, zero trust architectures, we have to make sure that we're designing things using our best knowledge in Jaren technology to make sure that the user experience is facilitating to aging and not more excluding. So when you get images like this, where the older style think, oh, I don't know if I should click on that email, it's not just that couple anymore. It's this image of this man who is in, a Latin American country. It's this man in South Asia in an extremely rural village who has mobile only for his communication. It's this woman from Nepal. It's this risk landscape that we have to think about. It's not just that little middle-aged couple in North America. This is a truly global phenomenon. And we know that the scale and the speed, how fast we're moving in this area really is like a rocket launching. And AI is incredibly inexpensive for fraudsters. So once they get the technology going around things like voice cloning and deepfakes, then those push payments can come through. In many ways, it's the ultimate capital market. And the minute that a fraud is not effective, they get rid of it and they try another one. And so when you're thinking about what are the risks, what helps to, if you will, make people more resilient to it, particularly since one of the realities is we need to change our education and our thinking about frauds and scams from those old analog phone calls or those knocks on the doors or those emails to really understand what helps. So what we know is that if that person has had training and education and awareness in a non-shameful way where they get to keep face and dignity, it will absolutely lower your chances of having that even AI-enabled frauds and scams. And if you have a way of speaking about people that are targeted education that is normalizing it. Look, this is not just about you as a 95-year-old person. This happens to everyone. And making sure that you're using your language, which is not making the older person feel like they are stupid. So instead of saying things like, I can't believe that romance scam, how could you fall for it? How much did they take out of you? Changing it by saying, how much did these incredibly sophisticated criminals steal from you? So when we're thinking about these types of targeted education, what we know is it's incredibly important to get the word out, but make sure that people are speaking it in a way that's not blaming, and a way that's normalizing these problems, and that we make sure that people stay socially connected, because loneliness is one of those predictors for who's going to get hurt. And it's not just people with low education. In fact, the AI scams target people with higher education, and because they often have more money. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura, for sharing with us. Laura will now take some questions from our audience. Let's take a look at the questions. The first question is the trend of financial abuse that elderly with different education levels are at risk?
One of the things that's important to remember is it may be little amounts of money. It may start off as just small transactions, or it could be a big single crisis that you have that wipes you out. And in many cases, it's equally possible. One of the things that's important to remember is not only are we using AI frauds and scams to do one thing, but there is this hidden black, if you will call it, a black or shadow capital market, where this information is now being sold in a very sophisticated way to other scammers. Now, that was always true, but it was really done with sort of notepads and telephones. It was a very low-tech approach. Now, the data mining of a person is incredibly valuable. That's true in the real capital markets as well as the black or shadow illegal capital markets. But that data mining is now being sold so much that the amount of money they steal from you in the beginning may be less than actually the money that they get from other criminals who are purchasing the data as well. So even though you may have something that comes, say, from a social media marketplace, and something that comes from a romance scam, and something comes from a cryptocurrency scam, and they look like it's all separate, because of the AI-enabled and machine learning targeting, all of that is tailored to what you're most likely to try. And if they pick, oh yes, this person's got a more susceptible to a romance scam and not as susceptible to a crypto scam, well, they're going to double down. In relationship scams, you're more likely to get the grandparent scam because you fell for a romance scam. And it's really important that we understand that.
Thank you. Now let's look at the second question. For the elderly victims, they are usually regarded as like careless or ignorant. So it seems that we should empower the elderly instead of blaming them. What do you think about that?
One of the most important things to remember is that when we're talking about people who fall victim to frauds and scams, that we don't use words that are blaming, particularly blaming an older person. Think of the courage it takes to keep up with modern technology. I like technology. I've been a member of the German technology groups since the very beginning of them. And I still think, oh no, there's a new update on my operating system. What's that going to do? Or I'm excited to get my new phone, but also I know that it's going to be hard. And I'm a person with a pretty good knowledge of technology. Can you imagine what it's like for a 91-year-old man who lives in a rural village to now be a person who's FaceTiming or working on, WeChat or trying to sell things on a local marketplace? It's astounding. One of the things we often do, though, is that we talk about a younger person who gets victimized as frauds and scams as, it's unfortunate, or, they were moving fast. Of course, it can happen to anyone. But people then say, well, if I wasn't 19, but I was 91, is the narrative the same? And we know from the research, it's not. The narrative is very much, there must be something wrong with him. He's probably got dementia. He's so old, he can't understand what's going on, or he's from a rural community. So the narratives of bias come through time and time again. And you hear ageism, and you often hear gender bias, and you may hear racism, and you may hear other types of bias coming through. And yet, if you talked about it with somebody with those two numbers changed, 19, what we see is you're less likely to get all of that bias and more likely to get sympathy. So making sure that when we're talking about it, we're being careful. We're doing it in a way that normalizes this, frankly, absolutely existential security risk, and in a way that lets people understand that actually they are the victim. And what we need to do is make sure that it's not blaming the victim or making it all their responsibility to have 5 kinds of security, that we need our governmental systems, our regulators, our cryptocurrencies, our financial institutions to design better infrastructure and zero trust programmings, because we just can't be responsible for doing it all ourselves.
Thank you. The next question is about the work of CanAge. Could you share some examples of cross-sectoral actions that CanAge is now advocating?
Some of the examples of cross-sectoral actions we're really looking at is important to think about how AI and modern technologies are intersecting with other technologies. And we use something called our voices. So in English, we have 2 languages in Canada, but in English, it's VOICES, and it stands for Violence and Abuse Prevention, Optimal Health and Well-being, Infection Prevention and Disaster Response, Economic Security, and Social Inclusion. And so we have many different recommendations that are within those areas and areas that we're looking to advocate for. And one of those cross-cutting themes, of course, is the use of technology, both as an enabler, but also to make sure that we're really thinking through, is technology being used in the most effective way, and what are people's concerns and fears? And that can mean making sure that we're embedding technology in ways that support people and support their autonomy and support their choice and try to create harmony or whatever it is that that person is looking for, and not have to take them perhaps out of their community or out of their house, making sure that they feel like they have control of their lives, or in fact making sure that they're able to have the type of care and support that they need, but not to do it in a way that means that they don't have human interaction as well. So that can mean things like us integrating some of our work, advocating for classes to be available online as well as in person, or even support groups for people with dementia can be held online and in person, making sure that technology helps you with reminders like medications, or making sure that you're actually having memory prompts by using something like one of those, whether it's a Microsoft tool or a Google tool or an Apple tool, something like an Alexa or any of those types of reminders where you can have a voice interaction with somebody. In many cases, as we are aging, we may have fewer and fewer people in our lives. So many of our social systems were predicated on the idea of some type of filial piety or some type of a large number of children to a few older people. And those triangles are not the case. So one of the things that CanAge is thinking about is, how do we look at the world of aging and longevity? And how do we do it in a way that's both facilitative of individual people, but also to make sure that we're using our fewer precious resources in health and social care for the people who need it most and in the way that they want it? And I think that technology is going to be transformative, but only if we are keeping our messaging up to date with the technology and making sure that people have good user experience. So much of our user experience is not so good, and that often is because older people are not in the co-design program and the co-design process. And so what we know is, if older people and people with lived experience are helping to create software, or being involved in making sure that they're working on the hardware, at least in terms of user groups, that type of technology is going to benefit everyone, no matter their age.
Thank you once again for Laura sharing with us on how we shall take part in ending the abuse to the older adults. We'll keep in touch and exchange more in future. The coming sharing section by local commentator will be conducted in Cantonese. Please switch the language channel if needed. 以下係工作坊8科技助力防止長者受虐本地評論環節。承接兩位海外講者嘅分享，我哋好高興可以邀請到香港基督教服務處副總幹事、長者、復康及社區 Karrie 為我哋將海外嘅經驗引入本地討論。陳頌皓女士 Karrie 現任香港基督教服務處副總幹事、長者、復康及社區。佢具有豐富嘅社會服務經驗，積極關注弱勢社群嘅福祉，包括長者、護老者以及多元文化嘅社群。佢現時亦都係社聯長者服務專責委員會轄下工作小組召集人，參與認知障礙症發展行動計劃方案嘅草擬工作，致力與業界夥伴共建友善嘅社會。現在有請 Karrie。
好，多謝主持人，亦都多謝頭先兩位講者嘅分享。咁我喺以下呢一個環節咧，就嘗試咧就住兩位講者嘅分享咧，先去講下我自己有啲咩學習，覺得香港都可以學習嘅地方。首先我係嚟自香港基督教服務處啦，咁希望大家都認識下我哋。咁我試下總結一下喺兩位講者嘅分享裏邊，我覺得有一啲重點，我覺得係要留意嘅。第一樣咧就係其實咧長者嘅虐待嘅情況咧 elderly abuse 呢個情況咧，甚至乎係講到係長者嘅嗰個財務被剝削嘅情況，兩位講者都提到係 under report 嘅，基本上而家個數字未反映到個真實嘅情況。而其中一個好大嘅原因咧，基本上咧就係一啲長者係由於一啲原因唔去尋求協助，而佢哋講到嘅咧都係其實一啲社會 對一啲長者被騙啊、長者係被虐待嘅一啲嘅論述嘅。例如佢哋會被講成係，譬如佢哋被騙就會講成係無知啊、無腦啊呢啲，其實就會影響咗長者去尋求協助啦。同一時間亦都會影響咗咧成個社會嘅公眾咧對長者去尋求協助一啲睇法，而唔能夠即時俾到啲幫助佢哋嘅。而兩位講者，我覺得佢哋 promote 緊嘅一種，我自己覺得係一種stigma free 嘅 approach 去應對無論係長者虐待又或者係財務被騙嘅一啲情況嘅。咁因為其實咧，我自己會覺得咧就係佢哋提到咧就係基本上係要俾長者感到安全嘅話，要講出嚟嘅話咧，佢哋一定要感覺到係社會嘅觀感咧係 support 佢哋先至得。所以我哋呢度咧係牽涉到咧，我自己會覺得係一個觀念上邊嘅改變啦。咁另外講者亦都提到好重要嘅部分咧，其實咧就係科技啦。科技頭先我都聽到，科技係一種助力嚟嘅，但係亦都係一種即係助力係助兩方面嘅。科技越進步咧，可能咧嗰啲騙案嘅手法力就層出不窮。但係同一時間咧，我覺得科技進步咧，亦都會幫到咧我哋更可以咧去幫助到啲長者去防騙啊，甚至係防止被虐待嘅。咁另外一個重點咧，我自己會覺得兩位講者都提到咧，其實咧長者被虐待嘅情況、受虐嘅情況並唔係一個個人或者一個家庭嘅情況，佢係一個系統性嘅情況，而所以我哋係需要一個系統性去處理嘅。點解咁講咧？譬如我哋唔可以話長者佢俾人呃就係因為即係佢蠢，而其實可能係因為譬如建基於成個社會有機會係一個isolation 嘅原因啦，亦都有機會咧係建基於一啲我聽到頭先 Laura 甚至乎講咧係會有一啲犯罪嘅集團，其實咧係會操縱咗一啲嘅騙案啦。咁其實呢啲咧都唔係一個個人化嘅層面可以去處理嘅嘢，而係需要咧成個整體一個系統性去處理啦。咁另外亦都睇到其實 Compress 係好好嘅，嗰個係一個政府整體成個國家嘅一個推動力嚟嘅。咁而另外咧就係亦都兩位講者亦都提到咧，其實係要共同成個社會要共同承擔啦。特別我聽到 Laura 講咧，其實無論係政府啦，甚至有啲金融機構咧，其實係需要互相去協助咧，先至可以幫手長者去即係防止騙案嘅。咁另外咧就係AI 頭先講啦 ，AI 其實係一種驅動啦。我覺得佢可以而家嘅 AI 可以個偵測嘅情況同埋警示嘅情況都係可以幫到長者去防騙嘅。咁最後咧嗰個咧就係其實我想講咧就係喺Compress 嗰個經驗，大家會睇到咧，其實佢唔係淨係一個網站嚟嘅，佢基本上係一個一站式嘅支援俾到個長者，係由佢學識嗰個知識，去到佢提升佢對即係被虐嘅嗰個awareness 個醒覺，去到咧可以直接去攞到服務，甚至乎咧對於一啲多元語言啦，同埋咧係有啲特殊需要嘅長者咧，佢都會係創作令到呢個網頁本身咧係非常之容易俾佢哋用得到嘅。咁好啦，睇一睇香港嘅情況係點先。香港情況咧，其實我自己會覺得咧係好似嘅，同加拿大同埋澳洲一樣，大家咧都係有一種即係我自己會覺得係 under report 嘅情況嘅。如果我哋睇翻社署嗰個數據咧，2024年只不過係得283宗被即係 report 咗嘅一啲長者嘅虐待情況。如果我哋真係用世衛嗰個情況，即係每6個長者就有1個係會曾經遇過被虐待嘅情況嘅話，呢個係肯定好大嘅 under report 啦。咁另外一個狀況似咧就係喺香港即係長者受騙嘅情況，其實不停咁提升緊嘅。呢度咧其實係講緊咧係有22% 係上升嘅喺過去嗰5個月啫。但係咧，亦都有人講咧，其實咧基本上一啲長者被騙咧，好多時咧都係得10%、15%，佢真係會去report 嘅啫。大部分咧都唔 report 嘅。點解呢個狀況 under reporting 嘅狀況咧，好多時都係建基於頭先即係兩位講者有提過嘅一啲負面嘅論述啦。負面嘅論述會令到佢哋咧，其實都係唔敢去求助，或者會擔心嘅。咁當然亦都有另外一啲情況，就係佢哋嘅知識層面唔夠啦。覺醒嘅層面唔夠啦，甚至乎其實唔識得點去揾服務去幫佢手嘅。咁另外一個狀況咧，我覺得睇到咧就係，既然科技好進步嘅時候，但係我哋亦都睇到長者本身咧，亦都有個數碼嘅鴻溝係佢哋面對緊嘅情況嚟嘅。好多時其實我哋睇到咧喺疫情過後，長者好多時都 佢自己會有一個手提電話，但係佢係咪好叻去用嗰個工具咧？呢個係成疑嘅。尤其是我哋發覺有一啲基層嘅長者咧，就更加係比較即係唔係好能夠用到嗰個工具。咁另外我好想提嘅咧，其實就係其實我哋越嚟喺個社會裏邊咧，越嚟越多獨居嘅長者，甚至雙老嘅長者，嗰種被孤立嘅情況，其實咧係會令到佢哋更容易咧係有個風險咧，去有機會面對虐待嘅情況，又或者有機會係面對被騙嘅情況啦。咁我覺得另外喺香港咧，大家都要留意就係咧，我哋嗰個人口嘅結構其實開始變緊嘅。除咗話我哋係老化之外咧，其實喺我哋人口裏邊咧，面對認知障礙嗰個情況係越嚟越多嘅。咁如果係咁嘅話，即係話我哋高風險會面對被騙或者被虐嘅人口，有機會係會上升嘅。咁第二樣嘢咧就係多元文化嘅族群亦都會上升嘅。其實而家已經係講緊有8% 嘅多元文化族群，而65歲以上嘅多元文化嘅長者咧，基本上係喺2021年嘅數據已經係比2016年咧係高咗2.6倍嘅。咁而佢哋其實好多時即係如果大家知道咧，佢哋面對緊嗰個語言啊或者文化嗰個障礙咧，係會令到佢哋好難去攞到一啲資訊同服務嘅。咁好啦，講下香港而家嘅狀況。其實香港咧，我自己會覺得咧，雖然我哋唔係好似The Compass 咁，可能整體成個澳洲政府去做緊一個即係好大嘅，我覺得唔係網頁嚟嘅，佢係織緊一個網去 support 緊長者。但係其實咧，我哋喺唔同嘅各方面咧，都做緊好多嘅措施去幫緊啲長者嘅。咁呢度咧，其實我 list 收咗一啲，我都試下講一啲俾大家聽。譬如我哋喺一啲財務嘅教育上邊啦、防騙嘅教育上邊啦，其實唔同人都做緊嘢嘅。譬如我大家去睇到2年智慧呢個計劃，其實基本上係長者學院喺度同啲 NGO 一齊合作推行緊嘅。然後我哋又睇下低嗰個叫做有知識長者數碼共融計劃，其實係數碼科技數碼政策辦數字辦嗰度咧，其實去推行嘅。喺18區咧都會有啲支援網絡，教啲長者點樣去用手機。甚至乎已經開始 target 緊咧，想係一啲 dementia 嘅長者添。咁另外當然唔少得咧，就係一啲警方同埋金融機構合作嘅一啲計劃啦，包括即係大家可能都已經裝咗嗰個防騙字符 app 啊，同埋Untitled計劃其實都係好好嘅計劃嚟嘅，係會有一啲長者係被訓練，然後咧佢哋係將防騙知識咧係廣傳出去嘅。咁我特別想提到咧，其實就係已經有一啲電訊商咧，佢哋好已經開始做一啲專為長者而設嘅一啲數據嘅計劃添。而嗰啲計劃咧係已經係主動地幫長者過濾咗一啲嘅電話來電嘅。咁我覺得呢啲都係一啲好嘅措施。咁我自己會覺得，當大家睇到呢幅圖嘅時候，我嘅感覺就係咧，香港其實有好嘅基建工作，可以俾我哋咧再將呢啲點線面連埋一齊，再做得好啲嘅。而家嗰個狀況咧，就係我哋比較係資訊性同埋教育性傾向多啲嘅。咁但係咧就未必而嗰啲唔同嘅服務係比較分散啲嘅。我哋講工作係比較分散嘅，同埋而家咧係比較少系統性咧。我哋係會去好似頭先兩位講者講，就係嗰個負面嘅論述其實係會影響到長者，但我哋好少咧就係用呢個面向或者用呢個策略去應對而家嘅嗰個 elder abuse 或者佢哋被財務剝削嗰個情況嘅。咁好啦。去到最後咧，我自己會覺得都想同大家分享下喺香港行落去嘅時候可以試下點啦。第一樣我自己會覺得就好似我頭先講，點線面要連埋一齊啊。我哋有好多嘅工作，但係可唔可以唔好咁零散？可以好似Compass 咁，我哋參考佢，我哋一齊做咧，將佢擺埋喺同一個地方咧，令到長者更容易去攞到即係一啲資訊。加埋係一啲嘅工具同埋一啲 service 咧，呢個我覺得係大家係可以去諗嘅。第二樣嘢咧，我自己會覺得咧就係要令到成個社會咧都俾佢哋去感覺到咧係佢哋係被支援嘅，而我哋對佢哋咧係冇一啲係 bias 嘅。咁同埋另外一樣嘢咧，我會覺得雖然已經有好多點啦，但係亦都要去諗下，仲有冇啲點，仲有冇其他嘅點咧？我哋係忽略咗嘅，有冇 missing 咗嘅？譬如我舉個例子，會唔會其實而家咧，我哋就諗住有某一啲嘅地方，我哋可以接觸到長者，可以 engage 到佢，然後俾一啲資訊佢，俾啲服務佢。但係有冇一啲點，其實原來我哋都可以係就住長者本身嗰個生活嘅狀況，或者佢個 平時個習慣，然後我可以接觸到佢咧。我舉個例子，可能啲長者咧而家都會開始用醫健通、智方便，可唔可以用埋呢啲平台嚟，我將成件事都係可以話到俾佢聽嘅咧，而唔係即係醫療就講醫療嘅咧。醫療其實都可以講埋其他嘅嘢，而令到佢可以一站式啲、容易啲去 access 到嗰啲資訊，關於防騙、關於係長者虐待嘅咧。咁另外就係講咧就係我都覺得係另外可以諗下咧，就喺成個社會裏邊，如果我要用一個策略，就係我頭先講一個叫 anti-stigma 嘅策略去處理呢件事嘅時候，我可唔可以喺全港性裏邊可以有一啲嘅活動係大家一齊做嘅，而唔係淨係 target 長者嘅，應該係 target 所有年齡層嘅人，同埋甚至乎我哋會唔會去諗下，其實當傳媒去報導一啲長者被騙嘅時候，我可唔可以有一啲指引或者有啲監督嘅情況，讓佢哋都可以即係唔好太負面，亦都唔好太有stigma咁去報導呢啲狀況。咁另外咧，我覺得互聯互通都係好緊要嘅，唔同嘅 stakeholder。我舉個例係關於頭先我講話，而家越嚟越多獨居雙老。其實最近大家都知道咧，其實房委會咧係同關愛隊互通緊一啲獨居長者嘅訊息㗎。其實獨居長者都係其中一個高風險嘅群組啊！我哋可唔可以都去諗下類似咁嘅互聯互通？譬如知道有獨居長者，然後可能我哋都令到關愛隊原來都可以有相關防騙嘅一啲知識嘅時候，佢可以帶俾啲長者嘅咧。咁呢啲係我自己覺得可以諗嘅嘢。咁另外一點咧，就係關於data 呢件事啦，因為而家喺香港咧，我哋主要關於 elderly abuse 嘅數據咧，就係社署嘅數據，但係嗰個數據係要 report 咗，你先會有數據，所以大家淨會睇到就係2024年得200幾宗，咁我哋相信有好多都未係報導出嚟，亦都唔知道嘅。咁另外就算係一啲關於係長者係網騙啊嗰啲咧，我哋而家其實個分類咧都唔係好清晰咁去界定，淨係揾長者嘅資料嘅。咁我哋嚟緊可唔可以再喺data 收集上面再做多少少功夫，讓我哋更了解究竟長者而家面對緊嘅被虐情況，又或者長者佢運用即係網上嘅功能嘅各樣狀況係點，然後令到我哋可以做一啲針對性嘅措施去應對咧。呢個係我覺得係需要諗嘅。咁另外就係頭先講啦，即係我自己就唔係專家，不過我覺得今日講 technology， 我覺得 AI 咧係真係可以即係各位專家可以再諗多少少，點樣可以幫到我哋啲長者去預早去偵測到即係一啲即係可能異常嘅財務嘅狀況，然後等佢哋可以無論係佢身邊嘅人或者佢自己都可以有所預備。咁甚至乎我頭先我自己有諗過，我頭先講話可以收集數據咧，都可以透過網上嘅。譬如如果長者係用網上嘅一啲服務嘅時候，可唔可以我哋有啲網上嘅自我評估工具都俾佢哋填一填，填完之後我哋收集到啲數據，可能係可以攞嚟做分析嘅。咁另外咧就係如果for一啲長者，如果佢好擔心自己唔知又唔敢打俾人，又唔知點講嘅時候，我哋而家可唔可以用到一啲聊天機械人引下佢哋去講嘢？原來講完出嚟之後，可以佢哋就比較舒服啲，因為唔使擔心人哋會將嗰啲嘢講出去，反而可能用聊天機械人同佢講完之後，可唔可以將佢導引去一啲即係適當嘅服務咧？我覺得呢個都係可以大家考慮一下嘅嘢嚟嘅。咁最後咧，我想講咧就係其實成件事情裏邊咧，長者嗰個參與係最重要嘅。我哋要聽下長者究竟佢哋自己覺得邊一啲嘢其實先至幫到佢哋去即係預防被elderly abuse 或者係被騙。咁同一時間咧，我覺得亦都要去提升長者嗰個無論係數碼嘅能力或者係財務管理嘅能力，呢啲咧都係會有助於咧佢哋將來咧可以做好即係自己保護嘅措施嘅。最後咧，我喺呢度冇寫嘅，但係我覺得係可以諗嘅，因為我頭先都講過啦，其實越嚟越多 dementia 嘅長者會喺即係個社會裏邊出現嘅時候，我哋會唔會喺財務上面嘅規劃做好準備咧？成個社會可唔可以都早少少去再推翻關於譬如持久授權書啊，會唔會早啲呢啲知識會俾長者或者鼓勵佢哋開始去做呢件事咧？咁呢個就係我今日大約佢嘅分享啦。咁多謝大家。